So welcome back. Between John and I, we're just throwing stuff around. We got no power cords. We're going to get back and get started. And so welcome back, everyone. We just had an excellent question, which is, again, for everybody online. I think somebody asked how many people. Everybody always wants to know counts and stuff. So we had over 100 register online, which I think is really interesting. So even, and just as a side note, because we look at this really closely, as a side note, what we've seen at HighRoad as a trend is we try to have, the common thing is you need to have a live event, and everybody wants to know what the counts are. And what we've seen is even for people who are in Chicago, a lot of them chose to be virtual. And so it's just convenient. And so it's an interesting thing. And just as a side note on that one, we started a inbound lunch bunch program a couple of months ago, and we've been watching that really closely. And we started it with the idea that it would be just an in-person only event in Washington, D.C., and we had so many people that asked us, "Hey, can you make it virtual?" We started to make it virtual. And then what we saw is that since it was virtual, the number of people in DC started to decrease. And the only people that kept showing up were the other association tech vendors. And the association professionals stopped coming. So we said, you know what? We put out a survey, and you do what you do as a good marketer. Is it going to lose anything if we do it all virtually? Everybody said, no, we want it all virtually. So we said, no problem, we'll change to virtual. But I think it's an interesting thing, and just keep that in mind maybe as a precursor to Neil's talk later in the afternoon about online learning or education as a whole, modern education, right? And making it about what works for you. And so I think that's an interesting kind of viewpoint of that. We actually, more than anything, I think we could probably give away steak dinners, and there's just a lot of people who are like, I'd much rather just have it virtual and have it recorded. Knowing those two things, we've gotten really great engagement from that. But I think it's because we embrace the modern user. That's probably a good place to start. So today we're going to talk about, from my perspective, we're going to talk about this modern marketer and also the modern consumer. So who are we actually trying to serve in today's world? So the top three things that we hear all the time, and the impetus for putting this together, is that in working with our clients and working with the association market, the big things that are going on are these three. Maybe this is you. Evidently, there's this whole population called the baby boomer population. Maybe you've heard of it. And they actually don't want to continue to work forever. And they'd like to actually sometimes retire and leave their industry. And therefore, we're at this kind of cliff where people are scared that their entire membership is going to go, right? Because the generation behind it, Generation X, is only half the size. And even if every person in Generation X became a loyal association member, there's just not enough bodies, unless you charge us double, to fill up the gap from this, matriculating baby boomer population. The next population is Generation Y, the almighty millennials, right? And everybody wants the millennials because they're even bigger than the baby boomer population. So the whole now thing is like, hey, we need to grow because we're about to go out of business because we don't have any people. Okay, so this is kind of where we are in the association world for many organizations. And so they come back and they say, for the first time in almost 20 years, we have to grow. We have to grow. We need people desperately. People are dropping off, and we need the people that we have had a good ride, and we engage with them, and we sent out the email, and we told them it was early bird registration, and they registered for the event, and that worked great, and now it's not working anymore, right? And so now we're at this kind of pinnacle to say, what do we have to do? So we hear this all the time, and we've gone past the denial stage. We're a little past anger, and we have many associations who are like, okay, we're ready to get down to it. We need to grow. We need growth strategies. And so one of the things that we're seeing that we're also trying to document and looking at observationally is the influx, the massive influx of corporate marketers into the association world. And primarily they're coming in because they know growth strategy. That's what they do. Lead generation, demand generation, et cetera. So this need for people that know how to grow in a digital world is a huge factor for what associations are now looking for in leadership, et cetera. I was at a CEO Update breakfast panel, and they were talking to recruiters who are doing placement for executives in association. And they were asking them, how it was all about digital. So I found it really fascinating. And they said, what's the key thing that you need now in an association executive? And all the recruiters came back, the placement recruiters came back, and they said they have to know how to do change. Like they know how to grow, they have to know how to do change management, they have to lead change, they have to be change oriented, they have to constantly be nimble, right? And the whole thing is that if they're not visible on digitally, then they're invisible. And you saw every head in Washington, D.C. that was at that breakfast snap down, and everybody is, furiously scribbling because there's a huge change that really has occurred in the market, and that's what we're going to explore in the next kind of hour. So in saying that we need to grow is really the business challenge. The next piece is, well, how do we do this in today's world? So the answer or the question of where do we put the money? How do we do this? You're seeing a massive need for associations become more data-driven. And I think I'm happy to see that the numbers we just did with Demand Metric are starting to show that. This need for business intelligence is going up, right? Hence, you start seeing the power of marketing rise, the power of IT rise, this MarTech group come together saying, hey, we need to have better business metrics. We have to stop guessing. Like, there shouldn't be guessing in 2015. Knowing the email open rate and the click-through is awesome sauce, but it doesn't actually get us anything, right? We need to know, did it actually drive money? Did it drive the response we need? We need to be data-driven. We need to stop infighting between, what this department head thinks and what this one says, and like speculating and saying, well, maybe they'll like the product, and we need to get to have more corporate-level product marketing processes, test marketing, roll it out to the market, right, in a very scientific method. So we see that all the time, too. And the last one is that, hey, we can't, at the same time as we need to grow, we can't bleed out the back end, right? We have to keep our member base as solid as we possibly can, and that also is at risk. So we're in a double risk situation. We need to grow, but then we have a population, we need to hold on to them as much as we can, but they've also changed, right? So even though we had this big base of people that have pretty much been stable for usually about the last 15, 20 years, they have changed too, right? And we haven't kept up with the change. So how do we modernize is really kind of the key question. And these are really the challenges. And these aren't small challenges. This isn't like we need to find more people to email to. Okay, that's not the challenge. These are systemic, endemic problems that are organizational in nature. Okay, they require kind of a top-down approach. And so what we're kind of proposing in HighRoad is that if we can get the right people, the technology, the events, et cetera, we can solve these problems. At the end of the day, I'm going to tell you, it comes down to really one thing. And I think that's the thing that makes a difference, the value creators that John was talking about, mindset. Mindset, right? So if you have people in your organization that are fixed mindset, not growth-oriented, bit of a non-starter. So we're going to talk about today and the growth mindset, really, of marketing and how this actually kind of comes together. So we're going to start with the consumer. Now, what's interesting about the modern consumer is we're all a modern consumer, right? Has anybody never heard of the Google? Right? Has anybody never shopped online? We have anybody out there? So it's one of those things where somehow, as we cross the threshold from our own lives into our association office space, we forget that the same modern consumer that we are is who our members are, et cetera. And we somehow expect them to be somehow giving us a break or saying oh, it's okay, it's all right that it takes me 75 steps to get through your e-commerce basket because, you're only an association, right? And we don't have that kind of slack. So the modern consumer is still who we are, and we've radically shifted in who we're talking about. Now, of course, caveat being, depends where you are geographically in the world, depends on who your members are, depends on a lot of different varieties. But as a whole, if we're talking about kind of like the Western world, et cetera, we've all shifted. We're different people than we were, even 5 years ago, right? So we now know that most people spend 70% of their time making a buying decision through research before they ever talk to the person, the entity, et cetera. So you have to say right there, case in point, if somebody's doing research on you 70%, can they make up their mind 70% of the time to either attend your meeting, decide to undertake your certification process, become a member? Are you giving them enough out there for them to make that decision? Okay? Probably not, because the last 10 to 15 years we have been die-hard gatekeepers of our value-added content, right? Nobody's going to get to that stuff until, we get the firstborn and the Social Security number. So these things are, a lot of the consumer behavior that shifted is forcing us to rethink the premises on which we've built things like email, websites, right, our programs, et cetera. And it's a little bit disruptive. The other part is that, what used to work great? I used to send out a direct mail piece and tell you that we're the best association ever, and we're the only one for you, and used to do what we said. And that was awesome, that was like really great. The problem is now the power of brands is not in the brand itself. It's in the people that support that brand, right? So LeBron James saying you should drink Sprite is a lot better than Sprite saying you should drink Sprite. Make sense? So we're in the world of word of mouth. And so word of mouth is really the power driver. So this is tough for an association who the entity has been the brand, and also that you haven't had competition of voice, right? So you might not have a competitor. You might be the only game in town. You're the only people that can, certify this particular type of physician or whatnot. But it doesn't mean that you have brand equity. And so a lot of now the modern consumer is about brand equity. Who do I feel brand loyal to? Like I've got my brands, I'm going to be an Under Armour gal. I'm going to be, I'm a Starbucks person. I'm an Audi driver. Whatever those things may be, your association needs to be in that same consideration set. Because again, the modern consumer is not really distinguishing you, okay? So we need to think about that because that shifted. The other thing about that is this not only is now the other people associated to your brand kind of what is the driving force between making a decision whether you're worth it or not, but that trust is kind of the key piece of it. So it used to be, again, that whatever brand we're talking about, the federal government, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the association of ABC manufacturers, the school system, the United States Post Office, whatever the case may be, these big entity brands would tell you this is the way of life, and you would absolutely accept it and not even question it. And see, that's really kind of shifted. That's not really how it is anymore. Now it's really about, well, what do my friends say, right? What do I believe? What do my people think? And so these big kind of institutional brands don't have the same trust. That trust has somehow been broken especially in the I'm going to speak specifically for America in this example. A lot of that trust has been broken. There's a lot of skepticism in there. So when that happens, if you continue with that kind of corporate, very distant speak, it actually undermines and keeps driving down the brand trust. People don't trust it, which is why you see now brands have far more of a personality. They're far more intimate with you. They're far more talking to you in a very intimate way. They're being far more open to making mistakes, okay? So since we are from the email world, I'll give you a quick example. Maybe you've been in email a long time, and about even 10 years ago, 7 years ago, even 5 years ago, does anybody remember what would happen? Like you'd have heart palpitations before you hit send. Like if you sent this thing out to people and there was one typo in it, I mean, you could lose your job. I mean, you could be fired. Like somebody, the phone is ringing. So you're, okay, we're going to go. Did we triple check it 55,000 times? And you hit send and invariably something goes wrong. And here comes the board member, right? Here comes the phone. And you're just cringing. You're like, oh my God, and people used to get fired. I absolutely remember the time people would get fired for a typo in an email. What do brands now do now? They send out an email and they go, whoops, right? Big circle. Sorry, we didn't mean to do that. My bad. Hey, here's what we really meant to do. And you know what? Does anybody think really twice about it anymore? It's like, oh, well, hey, I made a mistake too. And actually they turn it to be funny, right? So brands now you're starting to see have more of a personality. And that's because it engenders trust. So we have to say to ourselves, from a modern consumer viewpoint, are we doing that as an association? I took a picture, but I don't have time to upload it to my slides. But at the W Hotel, I think it was so brilliant. In the bathroom, okay, I'm going to take you there. There's the spare toilet roll, right? It has a little bag, and it says backup plan, okay? So, which is hilarious. So if you run out of your first roll of toilet paper, here's your backup plan. But the W as a brand has made it into a thing, and it's funny. Now, the same people that stay at the W, you have to say, are those also your members? Are they same people that fly Virgin Atlantic? Are they the same people who, maybe buy Under Armour or, go to Starbucks, et cetera? Because there's a culture of brands now that is in style. And we have to say, how far away are we from that as an association? And it's all about that trust. So a lot of times, the more forthcoming you are, the more you can engender and you can build that trust because it's reality, right? And I like to call myself a reality marketer. It's far, if I tell you, it's far more realistic. There's too much pressure many times. I think John noted, Why do we see things coming down? Because we're all overwhelmed. You know, we like to say, does anybody here like totally have their whole life under control? Like you have like extra time. You're like, yeah, I've got my extra 7 minutes of meditation time right about now, right? Maybe John, because he's like the Zen master, like he's like the horse whisperer, you know. But most of us are way overwhelmed. And again, most associations especially, anybody suffering from too many resources, too much budget, too much time, no, you're jammed into so much stuff. As a matter of fact, I spent a good amount of time, and I sent them over to Tom later in the day, to look at bad association job descriptions. That's like one of my favorite pastimes. Like I find association jobs that are out there posted, and I just look at it and I go, wow, how much does this job suck? Because it's like 4 jobs in one, right? And I just found one the other day that's like, it actually said, like basically low probability of ever making a mistake due to poor planning. And it's like, yeah, who's got that? And you only needed to know like events, email marketing, sales, and I think being able to go to trade shows and organize them, right? It was so it's like the expectations are a little bit out of alignment. And that's a lot of it because we're not focused in on today's consumer. So how do we grow then with today's consumer? The first key of the whole thing is that we have to be marketable. So, you know, I go out and I do a fair amount of consulting in the association market. And they like to send me in because I can take the hits. And like I said, I'm a realistic marketer. So I come in and I do a lot of rip the Band-Aid moments, right? So I come in and the first thing you have to say is, you know, what you're offering, what you're purporting to have, does anybody actually want, right? And that's probably the hardest part of association reality checks, because a lot of the things that you have always been doing are just, they're missing the mark nowadays. Or it's a specific target population that still works for, but there's other target populations for which you have nothing, okay? So case in point, I'm not going to say what this is, but I actually got a call this week from an association asking me to become a member, which I thought was, they were like, hey, we see you filled out our thing online, which I hadn't, but okay. And they're like, we want you to, can we take 5 minutes and tell you why you should become a member? So I was really interested. I was like, this is really interesting. This is like an actual like pitch on why I should be a member from a personal perspective. I was ready. I mean, I was totally open. Like I would have written the check that day. I would have given them my money that day. And she's like, so go to the website and look at the, we have a ton of benefits and opportunities, and we've really bumped up our whole benefits piece of it. And I go, okay, great. So we're on the phone together. I go to the benefits page, and everything, the entire list of benefits was basically a discount scheme. So all I had to do was pay $500 to become a member, and then I get all my benefits, and for every benefit I get like $50 off. But I'm still paying more, but I get a discount, right? So I'm like, okay, so it's like a loyalty club program. No, because you get to come to the conference for like $300 less. And I'm like, okay, but the conference is like goes from like a Saturday to a Tuesday in California, and it's like $3,000. Right, so you can bring your family. Right, my family, no way, right? I've got like a 9 and 11-year-old. They have games every weekend, and there's no way I can take them all to that. Like nothing about that rings true to my life. Does it make sense what I'm saying? So none of their value or their benefits were anything that would be absolutely helpful to me. And I said, look, I love that you want me to be a member, but it's not in alignment with my lifestyle and who I am and anything I can actually take part in. So if I give you my money, what am I going to do? Because I can't do anything with it. And she was like, ooh, I got to go back to the drawing board with that one, right? Because it shows you who they're pitching to is not who the reality of who they want anymore, right? I don't know a lot of other women my age who are not in the same kind of situation that just have like a Saturday to a Tuesday to like, just go to California and hang out with a bunch of other marketers, right? We're like busy in our life. And so it wasn't set up in anything that would actually resonate. So we have to look at our kind of product offerings. The other thing is we have to understand how, again, the consumer shops. So what I was going to say to her is like, hey, is there anything I can try? Can I try this out? Can I see how valuable your content is? Maybe it's like amazing content. Well, no, you can't try out the content until you pay us the $500. Well, that sounds like I'm going to be a sucker. I'm going to give you $500 and I find out it's not really great content. Because we're in a try before you buy environment, right? We go through the grocery store, have some taste testing, try things. In the world of software, we're very used to free trials. Everything is about a try before culture. Try before you buy. And we have to say again, is our association set up for that? Okay? If I can't demonstrate the value of my organization, I can't experience it digitally today, then you're kind of out of luck. Okay? We have to find a way that somebody who doesn't know you, and this is the growth part, can experience you before they're going to go ahead and make the commitment. And we have to be set up to bring them and allow them to go through that experience before they convert into being whatever, an attendee, a donor, an advocate, etc. The last kind of piece of that is that most organizations, when I come in and I work with them, and I say, great, tell me about your segmentation. How are you going after your target markets? Who are your target markets? And they say, oh, it's really easy. Okay, we've got these two things. One's called non-member, and the other one's called member. Like, okay, that's not a target market. They said, great. Actually, it's better than that. We break it down by state. Okay, that's not a target market. Okay, now we break it out by type of member. Like we're the trade associations. We have manufacturing members, and then we have like consulting members. Okay, so that's another layer of segmentation. But what's your target market? Who are you going to be laser focused in on to say, if we had 10 more of these people and we could get another 20, we'd make our numbers and we'd be in great shape. That's a laser focused target market. And most organizations haven't gone through that process. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. Lastly, once you get that, you got to deliver the value. If we can do these things, though, growth is almost inevitable, right? You can get the lift that you're looking for. So I'll give you a couple examples. So the old school value proposition, and this is what maybe this is you, maybe it's not, it kind of goes like this. I'll read it to you if you're in the back of the room or if you're online. The old school value proposition, why should I become a member? We are the only organization that allows an individual or a company to receive the education and networking on our special topic or industry, and that is the voice of the industry, right? That is like a classic value proposition. So the problem is everybody has that power now. Everybody. You can, tweet it, blog it, take photos of it. I can have my own podcast, I can get on Zoom, I can publish, etc. Everybody can be the voice of the industry. Everybody can do these types of things. So it's not really speaking to me as an individual about why am I giving you my time and money, right? So none of us have extra time in the world. So you have to have a really compelling reason for why I'm going to give you my time and money. And it can't be because you're going to be giving me, you're the voice of me. Does that make sense? People are a little too more self-absorbed now. The new school is that we're the organization that's going to help you increase your personal power. That's what we're going to do. You roll with us, oh yeah, you're with another 100,000 people that are the best. You're the elite. This isn't the everybody gets a trophy. It's that you've correctly chosen to invest in yourself, and we're here to make you the best you can be. Now, okay, how much? Do you see what I'm saying? This is a very different value proposition. Depending on sometimes where you are generationally, it's like, oh, that doesn't sound good. This sounds like elitism. And yes, it is elitism. That is what is absolutely about, because if you look at it, it depends what your organization is. But for many an organization, it really is the top group of your industry that are members, right? There's something about people to say, why, all the people that you have that are members now, why are these people members? Now, if you're a trade association, or if there's something like the only way they can go is they have to be a member, it's going to be a little bit different. But if it's a voluntary thing, if the company is putting down a big amount of money because they care about advocacy and legislative issues, et cetera, we have to say, what's the common factor that runs through our membership that makes us the essence of who we are? And for a lot of organizations, it is that person. You're there to help facilitate them to become their very best. And they want to be then with other people who want to be their very best, right? So it's about personal power and performance. And so the association then can be able to now have a different role. Instead of being the voice of the industry, I mean, they'll probably still do that, but instead of just doing that, they're actually there to help facilitate your greatness. See, that's worth money. They're here to give you credibility. Now, what associations can do, that let's say the one guy who's in his own basement with his podcasting awesome, microphone, what they can't do is you have brand credibility and you have distribution channels, right? So you probably are sitting on 20, 40, 100,000 people. You've got the power of a real, credible voice. You're the CNN of your industry, okay? You're the Wall Street Journal. You're the Huffington Post, right? You're the HuffPo of your whole thing. So you have to take that as your power play and say, look, we have the ability to be able to make you into a superstar. And if you want personal power and you want to be the best of what you are, then let's see how we can work together to do that. And we'll see how that can be done in digital. So if you get that kind of thing, that's when you get into word of mouth and personal power. Here's how it happens. I'll give you a great example. Excuse me. So we have a client called Electronic Retailing Association. They're a trade association of all of the like infomercial people. So like the people at Beachbody, like Shaun T comes to their trade association, a trade event, et cetera. The Pet Rock, things like that. Zumba people. So they're people, they're marketing to marketers, which is very difficult. So they started to say, you know what? Instead of, again, us constantly telling people, you need to be a part of this, we're great at representing the member, let's have the member speak for it. So they pulled out 5 or 6 of their key people, and they put a whole campaign just around them. And they just highlighted them and what they do and took photos of them and have them write blog posts, and they put them up and they made a big deal of them. And you know what happened with that? People started writing into ERA like, how'd they get to do that? Right? How do I become that person? How do they want to do it? I want to be that person. They created demand. Because word of mouth, et cetera, was so strong, people started saying, if you get to have your name up in lights and you're like the blog author and et cetera, you're probably sending it out to people that you know. Now people are like, wow, that's really cool. I wanted that for me. Because they're tapping into the performance aspect of people, right? They're tapping into the competitive aspect of I want to be better. And so the word of mouth is now the one that's really what got that going. They didn't continue to send emails to everybody telling them that. They got the word of mouth going, and then it helped them, and then they were able to deliver it in a very economical way to do that. So brilliant. The other piece is that the buyer's journey itself has completely changed, and we have to accept that. We talked about 70% of the people are really doing their research online and trying to experience that, but are we really aware of how much the buyer's journey has changed? So for many associations, we're coming out of, we have a massive amount of foothold in the email space. Do you know still the percentage of our clients who have responsive templates? It's still only like 40%, meaning like it's designed for mobile first, okay? So it depends on your audience, but there's kind of a common myth out there that like, our users are college deans. They're just sitting at their desktops. And we'll come in, we'll do a study, and the next thing you know what the number one thing the college deans are on? Tablet. So it's like, have you designed this for a mobile experience? Are you thinking about how people are interacting between their desk and their phone and their tablet? Where is your association news getting consumed? A common thing in the association world, maybe this is you, is you only send, what's one of my favorites, you only send email between Monday to Friday during business hours for where your headquarter location is. And I often ask, why is that the case? Is that because that's when the user is going to actually consume your email? Oh, no. And I get this a lot. They never consume it during those hours because, like, they're doctors and, like, they're working. Something like that. Like, they don't do that. But that's when we send it because what if somebody calls? What if we send the email and somebody calls and somebody's not here on staff to answer the question? So then we say, well, okay, but maybe we should try something else. Do we actually know the likelihood of when people are consuming your email? When do you fit into their life to make value? Maybe it's while they're standing at the grocery store, on Friday night. Maybe it's when they're waiting for their kids' umpteenth ever soccer game or doubleheader baseball. And that's the perfect opportunity, right? To not have to talk to the other soccer mom and to be able to go through and read the news. Maybe it's just me. But that's a great time to get involved, right? But do we understand the buyer and how they're fitting in with your news, your technology, and how it's all working together? And for most associations, they haven't put their communications plan or their strategy from that viewpoint. So for most of us at the association world, talking about kind of the thought pattern, most of us have historically been in jobs where we're thought of as the front desk people of a hotel. We're not allowed to let anybody know what's going on in the back of the house. There are no mistakes happening. We've got it all under control, and we're there just to help. You walk up to me, I'm an order taker, I will help you, and I will go to give you what you're told, okay? That's the historic kind of way that the association staff has kind of been trained. We're now in a world of experienced designers, where it's more like if we as an association staff, we're going to design the perfect membership experience or the perfect conference, okay, what would it be? Right? Where would we put the pool? Where would we put the bar? Where would we put, what entertainment we have? What time of day would it be? Where would we be on Earth? And that's a whole different way of thinking. That's a very exciting way of thinking. It's a lot of freedom to think that way. And to do it, we need to have digital. In this kind of mentality, we're asking an entirely different set of questions. In the first question of order taker, we're fully focused on what could go wrong, right? Everything is about risk mitigation. What if someone calls us? What if somebody writes a bad letter? What if somebody says something nasty on Twitter, right? And instantly on risk mitigation. Everything about what could go wrong. We're designing for the flaw, coming right out of manufacturing, right? That we've been coming out of that for a long time. This is asking a whole different, what if it goes right? What if they do write back? At least we know they have a heartbeat. Somebody's out there, right? What are they using? What do they like? What else could they be doing? What else could we be giving to them? What are they thinking about? Where are they getting their news? What are they looking at? What do they find beautiful? What do they find distasteful? Do we know the norms anymore of our culture, right? Do we know this? This is a very different way. This is a growth mindset way. We're not thinking about risk mitigation first. We're still going to think about risk. We're not going to like just throw it to the wind. But we're going to ask really more provocative questions because it's about experience. It's like if we all worked at Walt Disney World, and we were thinking about how do we design a great experience where people want to come back again and again and again. What would the interface look like for the ideal member application, right? Or what would the steps be? How do we make it super easy? How do we make it fun? How do we make joining, fun, instead of just functional, instead of like, oh, we have to, design for the person who can't do it. What if we had designed for the person who could do it? Very different. Instead of designing for the kind of the no child left behind, you're other end of the bell curve, which is how do we design for the people who really can take it and run? Okay, so an interesting kind of way to think of it. And in order to do that, we need to have data, right? So we need data. We need it on 3 different levels. And this is what we hear organizations asking us all the time. We need data at the individual level, the group level, and the population. We're going to talk about how we can get to all 3, how modern marketers are getting this, okay? So the answer for, again, how do we grow is in order to grow effectively, we gotta understand and have deep information about our users. We gotta understand who these people are. We can't guess. We gotta constantly test. Some of the brands who have the best knowledge of their user behavior are going to be people that make baby diapers and people that make baby formula. Okay? They know so well. Has anybody ever had children in this room and gone through that process? How do they know? Here comes the baby 6 months, and here comes that diaper in the mail, right? Next time for the next size. They bought the data from the hospital, right? And they know everything about that kid, and then they know what you're doing. Another one of my favorite, Dick's Sporting Goods. Dick's Sporting Goods knows exactly what, I'm sure that they have an entire profile. I don't know why we don't have like the Black American Express card at Dick's Sporting Goods for my family, but they know every sport that my kids play. And they know when the season's coming up, and the value-added coupons come just in the nick of time, right? They actually send stuff now where they're like, hey, we're watching your transactional patterns, and we see your kid must be going through puberty, and their feet are growing quickly. How about a 2-for-1 cleat offer? Are you kidding me? Yeah, I'm totally about that. So the point is they know that data. Some of the retail people know the data so well, they're able to predict and be in advance of what you need to the point where it feels like a concierge service, right? So instead of being creepy, they're doing it in a way that's so helpful to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and I'm going to stall my purchase to wait until my coupon comes in because I'm going to go there. Because they know that we're a lacrosse, football, basketball family. And they know that's going to happen and those things are going to come, and I rely on them now. I trust them. That level of understanding of user behavior is something that every association probably can really have. You have more data than retail companies or for-profits have already, right? So the question is, are you really using it? And are you missing opportunities to collect data? Choice data is what we're really going to kind of focus in on. So in order to do this, and one way to attract people and get to know them better, we got to do this ungating of the content, right? So the reason that content marketing is seeing such an uptick in the association market, and has been doing this for years in the corporate market, is because by looking at what you're consuming from a content perspective, I'm understanding what you value. I'm understanding where your time's going. I'm understanding what topics you're interested in. I'm understanding, and I'm constantly trying to understand where I can get to you and what resonates so I can give you greater value. If I can see that you're always interested in, articles on, let's say you're an independent dentist and you want to see how you can run your practice better. You're always looking at practice management types of issues. Why would I not make the conclusion I should continue to serve up that type of content, right? I'm seeing where the value add is, and content allows me to do that. That is why content marketing is all over the place. People are throwing you out content offers constantly, and you're trying to figure out which one. It's like bait, right? Which one are you going to bite on? And the content marketing is allowed to do that. But for many associations, it's hard because they've been gating this content so strongly for so many years, and saying that's the purpose of you paying us the membership dollars is our content. This idea of letting out some of your most valuable stuff out there and using it as bait to bring people in sometimes can be very upsetting depending on who the people are. I've had somebody throw a book at me before. Like, this is like a horrible idea, like, what? Like, we can't do that. Because it's so upsetting because they've spent years building up these kind of gated trust funds of content. But that's actually something that can work quite well. We talked about the try before you buy. We're all in a sample, like, if you think of it like a wine flight, okay? So I'm going to go and I'm going to do wine sampling, wine tasting. Do I have the right wine flight for my member, right? For a prospective member? For a prospective attendee? Is there ways that they can kind of do a little taste test to find out what thing is going to resonate with them, to say it's the tipping point to say, that's the event I want to go to. Yes, indeed, that's what I want to have. Or does it have a little option in there that's going to be the right one for me? So again, I'm not one message for everyone. Some people like Viognier. Some people are, Cabernet Sauvignon people. What is the right flavor for my prospective attendee, member, etc.? And understanding that. Excuse me. And the same for the members too, right? Because we are coming out of this age of one message for everyone, right? Like, we're coming out of this idea we can only have one email that can go out on Thursday, and everybody has to fight for that space, right? We're out of that philosophy. Everybody's smiling in the room. I know. Just get it out. Just get it out. So we're moving out of that because technology's come down in price. It's made it easier. We can get out of that mentality. Okay, that's a very stressful thing. We got to get the right people to the right place. So to do that, we're going to move into a different way of thinking about data. And I call this the do you know your know, right? What do we know right now about our membership or our database, et cetera? For most of us, we've done an awesome job over the last 10 years, spending a ton of money on our association management systems, getting awesome data integrity standards in place, and really building a huge storehouse of incredible data, of transactional data, demographic data, et cetera. So we can all pat ourselves in the back because it's far beyond what the corporate market has on their own, customer base. Many of us have actually already added on like relationship data. Who do you know? Who are you contacted with? Excuse me. How are you connected to a company? Right? What's the multi-entity relationship? What school did you go to? Any of those kinds of relationship data. Many of us as associations, we've been gathering also that for years, which is great. What other associations are you a member of? I love when associations ask that question. It's a great one. Where do you get your information? Starting to understand. For most of us, we don't have too much on the behavioral side. And if you're a good marketer, you're not happy until you know down to what toothpaste brand somebody uses. Like, only then are you happy. Like, I need to know everything. Like, did you find the backup plan toilet paper roll funny? Because if you do, then you're in this group of people. If you didn't, right, you're in this group. That's going to tell me how I can approach you. Colgate people are maybe different than Sensodyne people that are different than, Crest people. I want to know that. People tend to be brand loyal to their toothpaste. Anybody here have like one toothpaste, you always buy it? Brand loyal toothpaste people? Toothpaste is one of those things. Deodorant's another one. If you can find that out, and it seems creepy, okay, come on, we all do it. If you're a good marketer, you go to the grocery store, and while you're in line, you're looking at everybody's belt, right, of what they have, and in your mind, you're already profiling, and you're fitting them into personas. If you get like me, you're like in a persona, you start making little conversations a whole bit. Coping things, right? Things that make the time go past. So it's one of those things, though, and think of it that way. All the grocery stores sell off your data. They're selling it off, so all that household level data is out there too. So everybody is in this game of trying to understand the behavior. Okay, there's behavioral information now we need to get. Two very important types, self-reported and then actual. There's always these two levels. And I'll give you a really easy example. You go to the doctor's office and they ask you, how often do you drink alcohol? Yes or no? And you feel, okay, I'm going to guess. How many drinks a week do you have? Okay, the probability of what you actually reported and reality is very low. There's usually a very large gap between that. The same on the one of how often do you exercise, right? So I know that I have a background in public health as well, in social marketing. So these things of self-reported behavior are actually just an indicator, a jumping off point for the physician or whomever to have the conversation with you. Don't think for a second they buy anything that you just wrote down. Okay, they don't actually believe you. So you might as well either just jack it up way high or low and like make a joke out of it, okay? So, because there's the other side of it, which is what you actually do. So the reason you want to go from behavioral data is you want to get predictive and proactive. If I can get both pieces of data, you said you want this particular topic, but in reality, every time you get that email, you're reading these other things. I got two sets of data for you. I got two levels. I can really start to know you well. It's like on one level, you're striving to be a really great manager, but at the end of the day, you don't really find it that interesting. Okay? Maybe you really find this other thing quite interesting. Nothing wrong with that, and there's no value connotations on here. We're just trying to understand individual behavior. But the other piece, if we can get that, I can get proactive, right? Instead of constantly looking behind the scenes, I can say, hey, people like, it's the Amazon model. If you like this, you'll probably like this. And now we're marketing on probability. And that's probably the single biggest thing, if I can convey anything today. It's that marketing now is about probability. What's the probability that you're going to like or elicit the right response that we want you to have? If I do these 5 things, what's the probability that you'll adopt it? What's the probability that you will register? And so I say that because if you're a marketer, you're always in this like crosshairs of being wrong and you're stupid and it's not working and you're scared. There's a lot of fear in marketing because you can be replaced like that. You're often overhead, etc. But in the world of probability, this is a different mode as well. I mean, completely. It's a scientific method. So there's no like value connotation of you're right, I'm wrong. It's not as emotional and emotive and, and vindictive and accusatory. Not that that ever happens between departments and associations. I'm just saying. But you can just say probability-wise. What's the probability if we go to the people that all registered for the event 3 years in a row, what's the probability that they're going to register again? And what can we do to help elicit the right response to get them to register faster? Okay? That's a different type of question, et cetera. And so we're going to use all of our behavioral data to be able to ask those types of questions. So obviously we need the right market, right? So in order to really get growth, we can't be all things to all people. We have to focus in and say, like a scientist, we're going to take this specific group, my little petri dish here, and we're going to apply a specific campaign with specific goals to elicit this response, and we're going to measure it. Okay? And if we do that, we will affect overall growth. Like rising, tide will lift all ships. We can't be all things to all people. We have to make sure our executives understand that. I can't grow the entire world at the same rate. Okay? Like I wish I could, but maybe with, again, endless resources and endless time. As soon as you have time and money, you have to focus. And what you find is if you focus and you really do a good job on that, the lift that you can get on that one target market can be enough to bring up and hit the revenue numbers you're looking for. Far more effective than, again, trying to be all things to all people. So target markets and getting into that behavioral data can really help us to do that. So one of the tools that people use to do that are personas. Personas just by a raise of hands, anybody here have personas or heard about them? I feel like they're kind of like all the rage now in association land. Like personas have finally hit, the invasion of personas. So personas are a fictitious representation of your target market. I go out, I do a lot of persona development workshops with organizations, and again, the typical thing is we say, they're like, we're ready for our personas, okay, great. And they start outlining their member types. Not a persona unless they're all exactly the same. Personas are a type of person, a type of fictitious buyer that you want to target, that if you had, again, 10 more of them, you'd be in heaven, right? That you would hit your goals, etc. And it helps the organization to understand the buyer's journey, and it helps the organization to align and stop having infighting. So for example, this is one of our personas at HighRoad, and her name is Power Heather. Okay? So Power Heather, what we find is our buyer's journey is that typically we have somebody that's really more along the millennial generation, They're researching all of our website. They're coming to our stuff. They're liking HighRoad. They're like, these people get it, etc. They take it back to Power Heather, and Power Heather is really who's making the decision on the money and who they partner with. So Power Heather, we make up a picture of this person. You make up the role. You make up the whole day in the life, their title, their demographics, the challenges they have, the story, etc., so that you can kind of get a vision of who these people are. Now I can be able to say, okay, look, if I'm coming out with this event, we're designing our certification program, we're going to come out with a new seminar, we're going to have a webinar, I'm going to write a new article, new research. How's Power Heather going to feel about it? Okay? Now the organization can align around Power Heather. Instead of saying, well, it's, I think or you think. No, what does Power Heather think? We, the staff, immaterial, right? Do we have the right technology for Power Heather? Is Power Heather going to find this, online e-commerce process frustrating? How's Power Heather going to feel? And if Power Heather's happy, we're all happy, right? It's that type of an idea. So just to give you an example, for our purposes, Power Heather, we also ask her if she was, and we're asking, if you were to say what's your role or what's your purpose at an organization, what would you say? And in the Power Heather case, she would say, I'm a visionary for my organization. Okay, a self-perception question. This is a self-reported, she's perceiving herself. I didn't ask her what a job title was. I said, how do you perceive yourself, right? And that's a real insight into this person. Just hold that in the back of your mind for a second. So we write a little story about her, and but the story is not, again, it's about a day in the life, and that's the other piece. We're breaking down the walls between personal and professional. We're trying to understand people. Who are the other people that would think that the backup plan toilet paper is funny, right? We're putting that into the mix because people have to have, these are real people we're dealing with. They're not just member number 56724, right? So her story is like, she loves the Huffington Post, Real Simple, and Oprah. She enjoys Shark Week and learning programs. She secretly watches Real Housewives series because of the jewelry and clothes. She loves to travel, drives a nice but not luxury car that is practical for kids. She's either a mother with 2 kids or she chose never to have children. It's like one or the two, right? She's down-to-earth, pragmatic management style when backed by executive leadership. She's frantic and frenetic under pressure without executive or board support. She really wants to move the association forward and be progressive, and she's a calculated risk taker and believes in paying it forward. Okay? Now I know what kind of woman I'm dealing with. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a woman, but this person, this type of person. Now I can say, what is she going to get behind? Is she going to endorse this program? What would she think? Now I know where to get my testimonials, right? Why couldn't I find people like her and call them up and craft this around it? Get their buy-in. If I'm starting to design now for personas, that's a game changer. Game changer. Because I put something out there that resonates, what's important to her, and what do you know happens? They adopt it. So it allows me to be able to be on the mark with my program planning, my product creation, rolling it out, the message I'm going to use, etc. Right? Once we do this, doesn't that make sense? It does make sense versus guessing, right? But we just need to take all a day to kind of get this stuff into place. But this is very much coming through the association world. Corporates have been using this stuff for years because it helps you get focused and also say, where do I spend the money? That's another big one. Okay, so if we need to grow and Power Heather is bringing in a good chunk of change for our organization, what's the answer? What do we need to do? Get more Power Heathers, right? Now we have a game plan. So instead of just, again, I think John did a good job of saying, are we just looking at a measure for the amount of marketing activity? Are we all just busily, frenetically pouring out emails? And yes, you all are. We all know that, right? Hamster on the wheel, hamster on the wheel. Got to send it out. It's Thursday. But okay, instead of we say that, we take one day to say, hold on a second. Are we ready to grow? So now we are in a different game. Now we're in the game of hunting for Heathers, okay? How do we go get more Heathers? So we talked about we have to certainly have our data on it. We've done some amount of data. We have to set traps for more Heathers. We got to go find more Heathers and hunt for them. We have to check the traps, see if anybody's, had any bites, set more traps, measure, and then we got to treat Heather well. Because we got to treat Heather well because Heather has the power of what? Word of mouth. She's a powerful person, this Power Heather. If she goes out and she tells other people, because the probability is what? Her friends are also Power Heathers, or people at least that like Power Heather. So probability is that she can bring us more people. We just have to find her and treat her well and make her into an advocate. So first and foremost is, right, understanding our own data. Luckily for associations, you guys are more hooked up with technology and data. You could trip over it every step of the way. You guys have tons of technology and data. And for a lot of you, you've also done the harder work of doing all the integrations, right, of making all this data talk together so you get to the point of having data warehouses, et cetera. But if you're thinking, I don't think we have that much data, think again, because you all have phones, you have learning management systems, most of you do webinars, you have banner ads, you have an event system, you have your AMS, you have analytics, you've got a content management system, you have blogs, you have social, because everybody told you have to be on 17 different channels of social, and you do it even though you're not sure if it works, right? So you got tons of that, tons of data. What most of us don't have is pulling it together. So the second piece is, in doing that, here's the big rip the Band-Aid moment. If I need new power headers and I don't currently have them, how do I go get them, right? And so a lot of organizations, they say, oh, well, we would just do what we did 20 years ago. We just buy a list, right? You know what you can't buy? Email lists. You can't buy, and I say that every time I come out and speak, because people still think you can buy email lists. You cannot buy email lists, okay? Even if you do a third party and they're doing an email send to their attendees or their base, et cetera, make sure that you bring it back to something that you can measure conversion, right? But at the end of the day, a lot of the power headers out there, it's not like when we used to just be able to buy a fax list and blast them on fax. We have to go to where the power headers are, which means we need to understand where are their fishing holes, right? What does social media finally give us? That's the value of social media, right? So forget like the, whoo, this is Facebook. No, we need social media because that's a great way for me to go hunt where I need my people, okay? But most of us are not using social media from that kind of strategic kind of piece. And I'm going to use content as bait. So where do I hunt, right? So it could be a whole variety of different social channels, and I guarantee it's not all of them, and not all of them together. What we need to do is have a social media strategy where I can verify this is the right channel for this group, for Power Heather. Okay? Probably Power Heather has a lot going on, remember? Probably not on Google+, Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook, LinkedIn, all at the same time. We need to find the thing that makes sense, right? This is pragmatic kind of marketing. And we need to have good bait that's going to actually resonate. I just want to mention that it doesn't mean it's just social media. We can still do this in print and digital ads, right? We can still be able to put these things out there in the world. So think about putting beacons out into the world with the right message to try to bring back this Power Heather. Okay, so this is pervasive. It could be very much part of my live events and live event strategy. It should very much be part of my exhibitor and sponsorship strategy, but we often don't see this. So as long as I can have trackable URLs and I can put little beacons out there, I can do my digital measurement. The third thing is I'm going to put those beacons out there and then I'm going to measure them. And if you have good tools, because the technology is there, it's just an enabler, you should be able to see exactly from whence people came. So as John said, for most of us, we've spent 10 years, I know because I've been doing this a long time, spending all of our money on the AMS, the website, and email, which is a kick-ass combination if you already know everybody. As soon as you need to get somebody who you don't have their email address for, we got to blow it out. We got to do something else and bring people there, right? People don't naturally wake up, except for your board member and probably your executive, and come to your website first thing every day, right? So we have to bring people constantly to there. So the question is, how do we do that? We're talking about measuring offline too. The way you do that is you give them choices. You're constantly putting out those beacons to Power Heathers and finding out, again, what they want. This is the inquiring minds want to know piece of it. How do we do that? Instead of just saying, we're giving you news, we ask questions. Are these the topics you're interested in? What else would you like to know? Are you most likely to? Would you prefer to? You know, is anybody familiar with the Bud Light commercial, Up for Whatever, right? So they're asking you, are you up for whatever of these things? I took that same thing and I put it now in a lot of our forums and I go, you know, what are you up for? And I have like, I'll tweet for chocolate, I'll give signatures, you know, I'll do these things. These are ridiculous things that I ask because I know I'm coming to a live event. But do you know how much it tells me about yourself if you say I'll tweet for chocolate, or like I'm a coffeeholic, or I'll give autographs, or I'll do social media, you know, selfies? You're getting information about these people that you can make actionable, right? They're self-describing now who they think they are. from a population, I can now pick out, here's my extroverts, right? Here's my introverts. If I'm going to have a good party, what do I need to do? I need to pair up my extroverts and get them helping the introverts to have a good time. If you can do that, people walk away and say, that was a great event, right? What doesn't work is you just throw everybody in a room with a bar and say, this is networking, this is one of your benefits, and the extroverts are like, oh, I thought it was great. But there's only like one for every 10 introverts, right? The introverts are like, great, it's another networking time. Turn to your neighbor and let's all talk together and collaborate on the table, right? And some people are like, oh, I hate that. So you get to know these people by asking tons of questions. And as long as people understand why you're asking and there's a value added that they're giving, they're more than happy to talk about themselves and tell you what they're thinking, right? So are we asking provocative questions? These questions alone, if we ask them after seminars or evaluations and things like that, that's a lot better than, we'll get better answers than the room was too cold, right? As we always get. Okay. So some other things that people, I just want to mention that people forget about that are really great is being able to have other tools out there. So for example, most of us are not using SlideShare. So this is like a quick rundown of other digital tools that many people aren't using. SlideShare is a website. You upload your PowerPoints. You can do lead generation on there. But what's nice about SlideShare is it helps other people to find your content. It gets indexed. It comes up in Google, comes up in Bing, and all these views are just happening. So tools that are helping you to do better work and helping you to distribute more so, amplifying your stuff, always a plus, right? How many of us like things that help us to work better without us doing any additional work? Ding. Right, so that's a good one. So SlideShare is a great one. Gives you the analytics. That's what we need. LinkedIn, most underused tool in the association market. Why people spend more money on Facebook in the association market than LinkedIn is absolutely beside. I just don't even understand, unless it's your right target market. For most associations, you're a professional organization. Professionals are on LinkedIn. And in Facebook world, they want to talk about maybe their kids or their sports or their awesome dog and cat and where they just went to the Rocky Mountains. And you kind of coming into that world with them is like, oh, man. Like they might not want to do that. It depends on your market. But LinkedIn, however, is a great way to do it. And a lot of organizations are not aware that you can do very low-cost LinkedIn campaigns that are highly effective. We like that. And you get great analytics. We like that. That attracts people to us. Retargeting campaigns. Have you ever been out on a site and you were shopping maybe for a new whatever, purse, headphones, what have you, and you go to a totally different site and that ad magically appears? You're like, man, that's exactly what I was looking at. That's called retargeting. Why aren't associations doing this, right? Because that's something that can now come with you. Hey, are you interested? You're interested in being successful because, I don't know, let's say you're looking at, different cars. Then, successful, whatever, fill in the blank. Dentists, doctors, therapists, manufacturers, owners, etc. They belong to our association. Get them while they're shopping. They're in shopping mode, and you've got to tie into the elite kind of factor. All right. What about your learning management system? Another kind of underutilized tool that's out there, for lead gen especially. So learning management systems are awesome because they have tons of data in them, and they can tell you usage. How long did somebody look at a particular piece of content? How long did they watch the webinar? Did they sign up and do the evaluation? Did they get the certificate? Are they the type of people that want to get a certificate? We use our learning management system for pure lead generation. We create a bunch of content, all this will go into it, and we just watch it. We don't really do much else with it. But you know what's interesting? In order to get your certificate, we say fill out this evaluation to get your certificate. And just so you guys know, we're all testing you. So as soon as you fill out the evaluation, we usually ask kind of 3 questions, like Net Promoter Score. Did you learn something? Was this valuable? Would you come again? Pretty much, right? Any other questions? But what we find is that it's amazing how many people will fill out those 3 things just to download a PDF certificate that basically says you're awesome. Okay? We're just giving them a pause. They don't get money for it. We're not giving a discount. It's just like another little thing that they get. But you know what I found out by watching that from that way? Who are my high achievers? Where's my overachievers? Who are the overachievers? It's not enough that I went to the entire webinar. I'm getting my certificate, right? So I've already found out my overachievers and the people who really, they like that, okay? That behavior is telling me a ton. Plus, I get to see what topics they're interested in, how often they come back. I'm starting to see all this pattern behavior. We've been running this for, I want to say 9-10 months, and we have thousands, like 2,500 hours worth of views. Okay? So again, when I'm saying that association marketing is hot, I also have the data to prove it. But there's no reason from your LMS, you probably haven't been looking at it from this perspective. Probably the person in charge of your professional development and certification also doesn't think this way, right? But if you tie this together with the other data and we're taking it from a marketing viewpoint, this is powerful stuff. You got to have the right system to allow you to do that, but it's powerful stuff. Social media we talked about. Pinterest is another one I'm just going to throw out there too. Pinterest, we typically think about Pinterest as like, these are pretty dresses or shoes or jewelry, and Pinterest is great. But Pinterest can be a really great tool for, again, helping to lift up your search engine marketing, which is organic search. And also, you might not think about it, but every association has like hundreds of photos that the photographer took at the event that no one ever sees again. Like, where do they all go? I always think there's some vault in every association where all those photos go. The 45 people have the plaque and the whole bit. Well, why not use Pinterest? Because you put them out there, but then you get the social media effect and you get the indexing effect. What about infographics in your organization? What about things that help them, right? What about fun things, right? A whole collection of toothbrushes because you're the dental association, whatever. There's all sorts of stuff you can do there to just have fun with it or to invoke some sort of interest. People love infographics. Once you have it there, you tweet about it, you blog about it, etc. You make a whole circle of people, and you're constantly kind of putting that net out there to be able to test and tweak. Email preference centers. The last time we did the study, we only had 40% of respondents who had one or even knew what it was. Email preference centers, maybe it's a HighRoad thing, I think it is, but we've turned them into a great place to get more data on people. Email preference centers historically are a CASL CAN spam compliance piece. I have to be able to opt out legally, of your communication. But we've taken it to a whole new level, because if I'm already here, why am I not asking about what topics are you interested in? What level of information do you want? How frequently do you want to get content, right? What types of groups are you interested in? How do you see yourself? Do you want blogs? At what frequency do you want your blogs? Do you see yourself as a new professional, medium or pro? All of that we can capture. Why aren't we capturing that? Now when I'm doing my email, I know what content you want. Doesn't that make sense? We're starting to move to being a user-driven experience versus an organizationally driven experience. Along those lines of moving even digital interfaces to being user-driven is something called progressive profiling forms. In progressive profiling, there's a certain amount of information I should already know. So if you've already given me your first name, last name, email address, why am I having to fill it out the next time, right? Anybody go to doctor's offices ever? And every time you go in, they're like, oh, you have to fill out your new paperwork again. You're like, I just filled it out. Well, every time. Why are we doing this again to people? Instead, why not just pop in your email address? I know you've come back. Okay? Why don't I ask you a new question that gives me, the organization, something new to get one extra piece of information about you, etc. In this example, we're going to have the Heathers come to us, because one of the questions we're asking is, how do you envision yourself at the organization? And some of the answers are visionary for my organization. Guess what that maps directly to? My persona for Power Heather. I'm getting smarter by not doing anything. Check, like that, right? So they've now opted in to say, they're already going into the Power Heather bucket. Now I can start sending them things that Power Heather would like, okay? And I can start seeing, is the probability, was my hypothesis there correct? All right? Same thing of putting all that together and gathering all that information, then you can start having really smart communications. So this is ASE's Associations Now Plus newsletter. This whole thing, 100% automation. It is completely user-driven. So the person has picked out what topics they want in their email preference center. It's paired together with their member profile information. They said how frequently they want to get it. They said, here's the level of content I'm at, etc. Email goes out, and it just runs on its own. Each person, completely hyper-personalized. Subject line's different, content is in there different, etc. You know what happens? People like that. Why? Because it was created for them. Because they designed it themselves. So the open rates go up. The click-through rates go through, vanity metrics, but more importantly, we're starting to look at two other things in email I want to apprise you of, skim and glance, right, and long read. We want to see how many people are like long format readers, and there's no reason we can't do that. Same thing with our communities. Are we really taking the time to be able to study on the communities and see what people have, right? Our online learning piece, we were talking about using that as well for another way to catch people and convert them. And lastly, I want to mention blogs. We just did a whole thing on moving from email centricity to blog centricity. Blogs have kind of been always out there, and people, like, again, did them because you were supposed to. But blogs now have a whole different meaning for what you can do because they're called top of the funnel. Because blogs are out there and can be picked up in social media, indexed, etc., it's a great way for you to expose your wonderment to the world and bring people in. And blogs have something else where they have a email capability as well. It's a lot easier for people to put in blog content than set up all the email, etc., and test it and whatnot. So you're seeing organizations start saying, hey, we need to grow. What have corporates been using all these times for growth? Blogs. Once we get that, we're getting to conversion. So now we're kind of say, once we get somebody to give us our email address, what's the data that we get? Okay? So here's a potential Heather. This is the type of systems that you can now have and the type of insight you can now have from doing all this. So this person filled out my progressive profiling form. They said I'm a visionary, etc. I'm being able to see their full profile. I'm seeing the full timeline across all of my channels, everything that they did and what they came from, what website they came from, how they got here, what are they reading, did they get the email, was it delivered, etc. And I'm seeing now, I'm moving them through a funnel to where they became a lead, an opportunity, a customer, evangelist, etc. Okay? The technology's there. So the last part of that is, how do I keep them? I have to get Heather, keep Heather, praise Heather, right? I got to feed the monster. I've got Heather interested, Heather converted. I have to keep being able to do that. And I have to be able to constantly, give those trophies so that they give more. Because my whole goal is not to take that person and to be able to, again, spread the word to other people. All right? That leads us to this being a totally different kind of job, right? The people we need on staff are excited about experimentation and putting out the hypothesis and testing and coming back. And they're able to have that kind of risk aversion. And they're curious. And they want to see constantly, how much data do we have, what else can we know, et cetera. They're not this. We're not in the world of order takers anymore. Okay? It's one of the big shifts that we're going to see when Tom starts talking. We're back to being experienced designers. We're now working at the strategic level to say, are we designing the correct experience to make an optimal member experience? That type of thing, optimal attendee experience. And again, just repeating, we're constantly asking this different set of questions, right? We're now in inquiry. Always be closing, if you know sales. We call it always be inquiring, right? There's always, now the creative juices are constantly flowing, the energy is up, et cetera. It's amazing, again, what it can do to the actual organization. So we have new behavioral levels of insight. We do all these things. Remember, I have my information I have at this individual level. I've gotten my group level of understanding now my group of power Heathers, my segments, what they're doing, and now I'm looking at the population level as a whole as well. We do all this stuff, we start down this path, we're becoming a market-driven association. It puts us into a smarter, more effective, proactive role, right? Proactive role. Instead of spending all my time, looking at, great, let's spend on that and 55 minutes on what we're going to do this year, right? How are we designing for the Power Heather or our Tolerant Toms or our Marketing Marys, et cetera? And at the end of the day, the organizations we work with, I think the biggest things are the unity, the unity that comes out of departments. Now you have MarkTech working together, right? You have everything aligned. People are excited because it's not a personal thing like I'm going to be in trouble. We're all united to be able to empower, and we feel good about making Power Heather as powerful as she can be, right? We're celebrating it. We find out, oh, look, these people went on to do this. Yeah, we got them, right? We're doing good. That's what our mission is at the end of the day. Isn't that what we signed up for, right? So we're able to do these things, and what can happen within an organization, the organizational structure itself often changes. the budgets change, the energy goes through the roof, and people are excited. And it's a difference of night and day, and we see it all the time, and that's kind of probably one of the best parts of working at HighRoad. But being able to put that together is really what the modern association is now. This is a market-driven organization that's nimble. It's able to flex with whatever market indicators are happening. And again, the decisions are being made being member-driven. And I know we've always said we're member-driven, but most of us we've made the decisions internally and then pushed it to the members. This is the reverse, okay? This is us designing completely based on what they're giving us the feedback. So at the end of the day, the results are kind of extraordinary. We've got the insights, we've got the data, we're kind of geared up for being able to do something extraordinary that has a lot of promise. That's what I have. We're going to leave it there for a second because we're going to change over and talk about, that's wonderful, Suzanne. This sounds like an awesome framework, but who are the people that are going to drive it? And we're going to look into the human capital part of it and how much that's changing, because it's radically changed. I was telling you one of my pastimes is looking at job descriptions. I also constantly am looking at job titles. And one of our goals is to get marketing and this MarTech and get it pushed way up, because we need the strategic people at the top. And a lot of us have been lacking that. So we need the budgets, we need that understanding. So we're going to shift over, take a quick 5-minute or so break. And what do you want to do, Liz? 5 minutes? Oh, any questions? Yeah, thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Yes, please. Here we have it.
So you touched on it a little bit in your presentation, well, actually a lot, but what is your process for putting together buyer personas, and do you have a suggestion of how many we should have, or kind of what the average company does for it?
Awesome. It's like a softball. Let me cue that out. Yeah, so the typical, there's, like everything else, there's no set number it has to be. Typically it's kind of in that 3 to 5 range. That would be, if you start having more and more, you need teams of people handling it, but it depends on your organization. You might have really distinct groups. But that's kind of what we aim to do to start with. The key thing is that we try to design it first, to prioritize which ones you're developing, to be on which is going to have the greatest growth strategy associated with it. The methodology, funny, also you should ask, because we have a monthly toolkit program, and June's toolkit was all about personas and the methodology. But really the process I usually like to do is I sit down with the staff and whoever is a select group of people to do that, and we really go through, we look at the data, we do a lot of the data analysis, we look at all I'll look at every metric I can possibly get my hands on within your organization to look at that, so kind of a landscape audit review. And then we really sit with the staff and we talk about that. We get the feedback from the different departments because those people often know it best. And then actually doing actual interviews with somebody who represents a Power Heather. And true story, I developed Power Heather after doing this in our own base. And many of you, by the way, I think are Power Heathers in the room, so hello. But we went to our New York event and we had Heather Waddle, hey, from New Jersey Society of CPA. We had never met her, and her name was Heather, and she's Power Heather. We met her in person. She was our real person. And she's talking, and she didn't even know this. And she's like, yeah, I was reading on the Huffington Post. And I was like, are you kidding me? Did you just say that? Because that's, I showed her the persona. She goes, that's me exactly. So it's amazing, you really can find your Power Heathers. The other thing we can also do is, I think Ron's going to talk about it later in his presentation, but we spent some time up at HubSpot, and they have a Harvard business case that they did that's on doing their own personas. It's very insightful, and they talk about how they found their marketing Mary and how they built their now publicly traded company around it. So we'll do a couple of those things. So we can, and again, we can load those tools up. I think the June Toolkit Persona is already in your InReach platform, because we thought somebody would ask that, but hopefully that helps answer the question. Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? Good. All right, so let's take a bio break. 5 minutes? Okay, we'll see you back in 5 minutes.